Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and today I'm going to be doing a slightly different episode of Jin'talks usual. I'm going to be bringing some supplemental content in order to answer a question that I see a lot, and whilst I wait for more movement on the various fronts of the Blue Donut War. And that question specifically is, why do the two sides in the war that are currently experiencing a supercap deficit, so Tri and PL in the south and the DRF currently in the north, use coordinated Dreadbombs in order to deal with a supercapital fleet? Or, more succinctly, why don't Dreadbombs work against Superfleets? First of all, let's take a look at a fairly standard Nyx fitting, the least tanky of the two armor supercarriers. This also assumes that the Superfleet is using Apostles as their boosting ships, rather than Damnations, decreasing their EHP and resists a little bit. And that's just a factor of the practicality of super warfare. You are going to lose Damnations at a fairly rapid pace, even if you are winning the subcap fight in general. Macarials will just delete them from the grid. As you can see, it has around 30 million EHP with an average resist profile of 82.3%, and bringing with it 13,100 DPS. This means that when a Force Auxiliary, or as I would typically call it, a Forks, applies its reps to the super, it gains 42,000 EHP a second. In comparison, a standard Revelation, which is generally considered the best dread right now as far as I'm aware, does just shy of 10,000 DPS. That means that in order to break a supercarrier under reps, you'll need 4 times as many Dreadnoughts as the opponent has Force Auxiliaries. To put that in perspective, in Navula we saw PanFam bring at least 134 Force Auxiliaries to the field, which would mean that you would need 574 Dreads to break the reps on a Nyx in that fight. As such, as the FC of a Dread Bomb, you're basically forced to kill the Force Auxiliaries first, which is a tall task considering that they have 4 million EHP when compared to a Dreadnought's 3 million EHP. Which means that assuming that both sides have roughly equal DPS, the Dreadnoughts will be dying at a faster rate than Force Auxiliaries will. I would mention the Hull Energizer here, as they allow Dreadnoughts to live for an extra 22 seconds in structure, but this is also a mechanic the Force Auxiliaries have, effectively nullifying the trading potential of it. Another problem faced by Dreadbombs is the fact that they cannot be allowed to jump to a single Sino or otherwise clump up when entering the grid, especially in nullsec, as AoE Doomsdays can be used to incredible effect to chunk out large sections of the Dreadbomb, as we saw in XWY, where the combined Doomsdays of 3 Titans were sufficient to get an entire fleet of Dreadnoughts into 2/3 shield. This is then combined with the fact that Titans and supercarriers are, by design, incredibly good at killing Dreadnoughts, along with all other capitals, with each Nyx and Titan providing the same level of DPS as a Dread, whilst retaining their ability to move around the field and be repaired by friendly capitals. Not to mention the power of the targeted Doomsdays which Titans can wield, which can inflict up to 50% of a Dread's EHP in damage every 5 minutes. Now, if we were in this situation in a sub-capital fight where killing logistics fast enough is difficult and burning through reps is effectively impossible, we would generally use some variation of an alpha doctrine. In fact, the difficulty in medium-sized fleets in killing Force Auxiliaries is one of the reasons, alongside Citadels, that we've seen the meta in general centralize around the Macarial. However, Capital Gun Alpha does not scale properly with the DPS and EHP of both capitals and supercapitals. To give an example, a full Republic fleet Gyrostab and artillery fit Naglfar has roughly 21 times the DPS of a T2 Maelstrom, but only 9 times the Alpha, which means that you would need 310 max skilled, max damage fit Alpha Naglfars in order to volley a Nyx. And at that scale, it becomes difficult to ensure that guns cycle properly, making volley fire ineffective. In addition, relatively few entities can fill that level of Dreads full stop, let alone of a singular type. For reference, if Capital Artillery scaled up its volley in line with its DPS, it would volley for 224k EHP per shot. That would mean that it would take roughly 133 RT Naglfars to volley a Nyx. However, they would also have a cycle time of 27.3 seconds. So, in conclusion, Dreadbombs simply mathematically cannot work against a properly organised superfleet with enough force auxiliaries, and as BFGs and HORs allow the fleet to punch down to the subcapital level effectively, as the DRF found in the clip here where GOTG and PL's combined superfleet used mass BFGs to wipe out an abandoned fleet from the plane of the Earth, a properly organised, piloted and led superfleet represents an apex force that can primarily only be defeated by the use of one's own superfleet, which can either use massed single-target DDs to volley titans of supers, or simply grind down the opponent's force auxiliaries until the opposing superfleet is left with little or no support, at which point DPS can be turned on the main components of it. However, that's not to say that that is the only way in which a superfleet can be effectively mitigated. Another avenue by which a properly supported superfleet can be defeated is by the use of large numbers of ships capable of defanging supers, such as space superiority fit carriers or Test Daredevil Doctrine, for example, which would leave all non-Titan ships in the fleet ineffective, allowing subcap control to potentially be regained and turning the fight into a war of attrition over force auxiliaries. Still, the only combat-proven and tested method of defeating a superfleet remains to be bringing a superfleet of your own to the grid. Still, the potential cost of doing this, and especially the risk of losing your own supercapital fleet, means that if a comparable superfleet is in the area, both superfleets will likely remain undeployed. As such, having a supercapital umbrella over a theatre of war is important, due to both the fact that it's nearly impossible to defeat if supercapital supremacy can be achieved, allowing the use of it as an apex force, but also because it dissuades your opponents from bringing their own due to the risks then posed to them if they field theirs. It may help to use the mutually assured destruction doctrine that was implemented during the Cold War as a reference to understand this. In general, I think that this need to have a matching, or at least threatening to match, force of supercapitals in the area to dissuade your opponents from using them is something that's going to shape this current war very heavily. And this is in part due to the logistical problems in moving supercapitals from one theatre to another in this current war, given how large the DRF's space holdings are. In fact, it will take a Titan or supercarrier 10 jumps to get from MTO to SAI, which are respectively the flashpoints of the North and Southern theatres currently. Thankfully, however, the DRF does have another superfleet to work with, given that Legacy's superfleet has been useful in the South so far. And assuming that they can hold on to that supremacy in the area, the DRF should be free to move their supers north. However, thanks to jump fatigue, this travel is not going to be instant, and it's going to take a while for the DRF to be able to move their superfleet north. And it will be especially interesting for me to see not only what do PL and Guardians of the Galaxy get done whilst the DRF superfleet is in transit, but also if the war's pace will slow down once the DRF fleet is in the north and both sides are forced into a kind of capital on capital and subcapital on subcapital war. Or alternatively, to see if Pandemic Legion and the Guardians of the Galaxy consider the DRF superfleet in any way competitive with their own. If they don't, we're likely to see Pandemic Legion and Guardians of the Galaxy continue to use their superfleet, as they don't feel like the DRF can effectively mount a counterattack on the super level, which will tell us a lot about how both entities view each other in terms of military capability. Still, that's all for now from me. I intend to cover the MTO fight round 2 in my next update, so I'm saving that for them. I hope you enjoyed this more in-depth and kind of technical look at what kind of makes the combat of EVE Online tick. And I have to give a massive thank you to everyone who helped me to check notes and thoughts on this topic, as it's something I'll readily admit I am, not an expert on. I've never flown a super in combat in my life. I've never FC'd a super fleet. This is stuff I'm mostly picking up from how people have done it previously, why they've done it, and looking at the fits of ships that are dead, and then just asking questions to people who know better. Still, until next time, take care and fly smart.